All right. Greetings, guys. Just checking on Facebook there. We are live on Facebook now. We are also live on Zoom. Hi, Bongi. Okay, I can unmute you.
That's better.
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we have a couple of people on the Facebook Live as well. Welcome, those of you who are on Facebook. You can comment anytime, to share your views as we discuss. Thank you so much. At the end of the day, guys, it's all about us just taking the little steps that will take us to where we want to go. So welcome to the Destiny Changers Club. Apologies for last week. I could not speak. My mouth was sore from a dental procedure that I had. So I had to make an apology for that. So thank you so much for being here. What really prompted me, to come, for us to come together, and have this book club was the fact that I've been reading. I mean, I've been a student of personal development for a while now, but what I have realized is that all of us, as we go through life, we need a mentor. If we can get a physical mentor, that would be nice. But many of us can also get a virtual mentor via books. Reading books, listening to audios, and so forth and so on. And then also, I then became inspired, to take others along on my journey as I learn, so that we can all grow to become the leaders that, are worth following, that we want to become in our different areas of life. We are parents, we are business people, we are community leaders. There's so much, that's where we need to grow. To Wilde, he says, it is what we read. What you read when you don't have to, that determines what you will be when you can't help it. So we are going to meet situations in life where spontaneous or instant decisions have to be made. Those decisions can be fed by what we are learning and what we are reading, and building ourselves upon. So the meeting times, as we are starting right now, it's supposed to be 7 p.m. That's when the actual, book discussion begins. We are a minute to 7 now, so we are just doing the preliminaries for us to make sure that we are checked into sound and we are comfortable. And then, we'll have our keynote, facilitation, and then the book discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A session or a discussion afterwards. We should be in and out of here in the next 35 minutes, if everything goes according to plan. All right, so the book that we are reading is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I hope we've all got our copies, whether it's a soft copy or it's a hard copy or it's an audio copy. It really doesn't matter. You can get a hard copy or a Kindle from Amazon.com. You can also download an audio book if you open an audible.com account. That can allow you to download the audio book, which you can listen to in your car, listen to as you're cleaning the house. All this, is one way in which we can be able to cover a lot more area. Those of you who will be opening your audible.com accounts, if you're opening a first account, get in touch with me. I can actually send you a complimentary link to the book so that you get it for free. All right, because you'll be receiving a gift for the first time as you're opening your audible.com account. So just shoot me a personal message either on Facebook or on WhatsApp, or send me an email, and then I will send you a link so that you can get a complimentary book for you to download on audible.com. All right, so Now we are going to go straight into our discussion of what we read. Hopefully, even if you haven't read, I'm sure it won't be very difficult for you to follow the discussion. It will be even more interesting as you go back to read, just go back as quickly as possible to the beginning of the book. It's going to be a little bit more difficult because now we are moving. This is the third chapter that, the second chapter that we are looking at now, and there'll be much more for you to catch up on. But if you take the audio book with you, then you can be able, to listen as you go. All right. So we are looking at the overview of the 7 habits. Starting from next week, we are going to be looking at them one by one. So over the next 8 weeks, we should be done, with the book. 8 to 10 weeks, we should be done with looking at this book. All right. So what are the principles that are guiding us looking at these, habits? These 7 habits are actually, are what we do repeatedly. We are a product of what we do repeatedly, isn't it? According to Aristotle, he says what we do repeatedly, habits are actually what we repeatedly do. So excellence then is not an act, but a habit, right? So we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And you'll find that most of what we are, we don't even have to think about, the knee-jerk responses, what I usually call knee-jerk responses to situations. You find yourself sometimes when a child does something wrong, the way that you talk to that child is your default character. In other words, you're either, shouting at the child, or you are calmly talking to them, or you are pointing out people's mistakes all the time, as opposed to pointing out what they are doing right. So all these are things that we have carried, ingrained in us as character traits, that can either be positive or negative. So if our habits are considered to be positive, we are effective individuals, because in our relationships, in the decisions that we are making progress all the time. If we have negative tendencies in our characters, we then become ineffective individuals, because we are just by default, acting in a particular or in a certain way. So essentially, that is what Stephen Covey is talking about, to say we are a sum of of the way in which we are wired in our minds, the way in which we think in default, according to the situations that we find ourselves in. Can we change the habits, or can we not change the habits? Let me just get my book, because there are things that I highlighted in the book, which I don't. Can you pass me the book? Do you have it there? Right there. Thank you very much. All right. So there's a quotation that Stephen Covey actually starts with. Do you have my glasses? Or my glasses are here. All right. As he opens the chapter, he says, according to Horace Mann, he says, habits are like a cable. We weave a strand of it every day, and soon it cannot be broken. All right. Do we all agree with that? Can habits not change? Habits can change, eventually, because we can unlearn what we have learned, all right? So what causes the change is our willingness and our commitment to change. But it's not an easy process. If we look at the way in which a rocket takes off to go to space, for example, the amount of fuel, they say a rocket actually spends more than 50% of the fuel that it has in its engine just to break free of gravity. So we can see that it won't be easy for us to let go of the way that we have always done things, because it has been ingrained in us. But also, gravity can work for us or against us, right? How does gravity work for us? By keeping us solidly grounded, isn't it? So in other words, there are things that we need to hold on to because they are good. And then there are those things that we need to let go of because they are not serving us and they are not serving the relationships that we hold important to us. But now we have to be willing to go through that discomfort of fighting that gravity, which is saying, let me hold on to what is familiar, which is what we call our comfort zone, under normal circumstances when we are talking in terms of, personal development. So let's just go a little bit deeper and define, give some perspective to what we call the habits. What is it that we are calling a habits? Habits, according to Stephen Covey, is the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire, right? So it's where knowledge, skill, and desire overlap or interact with each other. Knowledge is knowing what to do and why you are doing it. Many a times we do things without even thinking why we are doing them. We know what to do without thinking. Sometimes we just do, right? But when we are becoming conscious now of the fact that, okay, this is the tendency that I have. Now you know what you are doing. You may not understand why you are doing it that way, maybe as an introductory way of understanding yourself. And then the skill is knowing how to do what we're supposed to do. And then number three, the desire is wanting to do what we now know we need to do, right? So that intersection or that overlap of knowledge, skill, and desire, that is what actually creates the habits that we have. Sometimes we may realize that, I've got a bad habit of doing A, B, C, but I'm not willing to go through the process of changing myself, because that process of changing myself means now I have a way that I know how to do. But now I have seen that there is a gap between my skill or my knowledge of what is ideal and the non-ideal behavior that I have. So do you have the desire to go through that process of transforming and changing your thinking, changing your behavior, changing the way in which you conduct and direct yourself on a daily basis? So in other words, habits also, they speak to personal and interpersonal effectiveness as well, right? So how I relate with myself, pertaining to particular situations and circumstances, and how I relate to others as well. So it's all about our personal relationship and our relationship with other people as well. So for us to change habits, of course, it means that we have to make some sacrifices. What are those sacrifices? We are going to feel pain because we are moving out of the comfort zone. We are going to feel discomfort because we are shifting away from the things that we held dear to us. It's going to take time. And do we want it? Do we want to feel the discomfort? Do we want to feel the pain that goes with us changing and transforming who we are? Those are things that we can only decide, for ourselves. All right, my internet is a little bit on and off, so bear with me if you are hearing any sled sound that side. All right, and then also, nature is a teacher for us to understand how these habits come to be, right? Nature has shown us, even as we look at our children, they are born as little infants, right? And it's a systematic growth process that is driven by laws of nature. We cannot change how a child grows or develops. That's just the natural progression of how they grow. Whether we plant a seed into the ground, it has to go into broken ground, water it, and then it germinates, and then it grows into a mature plant, whether it will be standing upright or not. Now, this is where the training comes in, all right? So when people are infants, they're dependent on others for everything. For them, understanding and interpreting the world around them, it all depends on the people who are giving them, that perspective. And then when they grow older, they start defining who they are. As they grow from childhood into adolescence, they now become less dependent and start developing some form of independence, right? And then at adolescence, the independent streaks takes over much more than dependency. They may be depending on their parents or their guardians for things or materials, but they are formulating their own opinions about a lot of things. And that is where a lot of conflict now arises between a parent and child, or a parent and a guardian. Why? Because this person is now starting to think independently of you, and they're starting to formulate their own opinion of what life is all about, what they want to become, and what they want to be, the ideologies that they want to subscribe to, and so forth and so on. So all these are processes of growth and development. So we are growing from being dependent to becoming independent, but pure maturity, full maturity arises when we are now actually codependent, when we realize that we depend on others and others depend on us. All right, we are going to unpack that a little bit more as we go. So I've put dependence, independence, and interdependence on the side of these characteristics or these traits that actually are what we call growth dimensions. In what areas are we growing? We are growing physically in our stature, our fitness, our health. We are growing mentally as well, how we are processing information, how we are, processing intellectual capacity and so on. And we should not mistake, according to what Stephen Covey says, we should not mistake that intellectual aspect of saying a person can answer between 1 + 1 = 2, Pythagoras theorem and things like that that are complicated. A person can be mentally and intellectually mature even without formal education. All right, but formal education, of course, because of the systems that we are living in, becomes an integral part or an important part of us saying that we are growing. And then, of course, there is the emotional side as well, and then the spiritual side as well. I put material in brackets because a lot of personal development teachers now are talking a lot about material planning. But you know what? Material planning is something that is a result of us being physically mature, being mentally and intellectually mature, being emotionally balanced, and being spiritually balanced. So spiritually anchored as well. So really, it's not one of the core, aspects of growth and development. Physical, mental and intellectual, emotional and spiritual. This is where now we really need to focus on. A person who is physically disabled, for example, can they be independent? Right? They may not be physically independent, but if they are mentally mature, they are intellectually mature, they are emotionally stable, and they are spiritually grounded, that person may only depend on others simply for the physical and not necessarily for everything else. They can be independent and formulate their own, ideologies that they live life by, etc., etc. I mean, I can't remember this the name of this guy that I have seen on the internet. He doesn't have legs. He's got no arms, no legs, but he has achieved so much. Because why? His parents actually taught him to be mentally and intellectually strong, emotionally strong, and spiritually grounded. Right? So, in other words, a person can be physically dependent because of a disability, but they can also, be very strong and able to stand for themselves. On the other hand, some people grow physically, right? They grow physically in terms of physical stature. They grow in terms of the years, in terms of age. But mentally and intellectually, maybe they are not there where they are supposed to be according to, the progression that we expect them to be at, emotionally and spiritually as well. All right. Then there is also the external factors now. What we are looking at to say, okay, I've grown physically, I'm growing myself mentally and intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. What about my circumstances? What role do they play? Other people's actions and decisions around me, how do they affect me? If I'm born into a poor family, can I, grow to be a physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually stable, sound person? If I am, I grew up with all the material things, and suddenly everything disappears or vanishes into thin air because of circumstances and maybe poor decisions that I have made and things like that. Does that still mean that I'm a respectable individual in society? All those are things that dynamics that keep changing. So circumstances really should not have anything to do with our independence, right? It should also have nothing to do with our interdependence with others as well, as we are going to see as we elaborate a little bit more. All right. So how are we doing for time? We are at 1:15. I should be done in the next 10 minutes, and then allow us to just converse and discuss, about what we have talked about so far. Right. So let's take a deeper dive now into these aspects of growth and development: dependence, independence, interdependence. Right. What is dependence? when we are talking about dependencies, we are saying, I cannot do this for myself. You've got to do it for me. I don't have the capacity, I don't have the ability to be able to do or to become that which you want me to be. So do this for me so that I can be able to grow to a point where I can develop my own independence. If you look at an infant and depend on everything, they depend on the person who is looking after them. It could be the mother, it could be the grandmother, who feed them the right meal. Everything depends on what other people are doing for that person, right? But as they grow, as they become more aware, eventually they now grow from dependence into independence. Here now, a person who is independent is empowered to act rather than be acted upon, right? So they've decided, on their own to be empowered, to act rather than to be acted upon. They have got the freedom to do and the freedom to be. So they have sovereignty. I mean, sovereignty for us Zimbabweans, we know, sometimes sovereignty can be very destructive. If you don't grow and mature from independence into interdependence, right? So independence is more about self-ownership, as opposed to material things, right? We need to really distinguish between that, because a person may not have a lot of material stuff, but they are still independent. They are able to look, to make decisions that will empower them, not necessarily for now, but for the future, simply because they have got the mental, they've got the ideologies that are going to take them to where they want to go. Interdependence now is that maturity of realizing that I do not live in a vacuum. I'm not an island. It's all about us and we. It's all about us building teams and working together, as opposed to me, working all by myself. So I cannot be truly interdependent until we are dependent. We are independent. So a dependent person does not have the capacity to become interdependent. So in other words, if my emotional validation, if the state of my emotions, what about me, I cannot be able to support somebody else and empower them to be able to stand on their own, because I still need a crutch on which to lean on myself. So those are some of the things that we need to realize, that we need, first of all, to build ourselves, have something from which to pour. I wrote something here in my notes as I was right. This is very, very important. And I think I really need to share this, the insights that I got. All right. First of all, for us to be independent, we need to own ourselves, right? Own yourself first, then give to and receive from others after you own yourself. So in other words, that is the private victories that we need to have. So when I am running on empty in my personal worth, it's impossible to give of myself to anyone else. So in other words, you cannot be able to give to others what you do not have. So independence has to precede interdependence. Always become independent first. According to this quotation here, it says, as an interdependent person, I have the opportunity to share myself deeply, meaningfully with others, and I have access to the vast resources and potential of other human beings as well. So in other words, you are willing to be spent for others, and you are also willing to receive from others as you are spending yourself on behalf of others as well. It will really go deeper as we really dive into the individual habits. So this leads us now to the individual groupings. It's all about being independent and then becoming interdependent, right? So the first group of habits that we are going to look at is where we score our private victories. Remember where, there's a saying that I was reading the other day during the week, where it was saying, work silently, in private, and let your results speak for you. Right? So this is where what we are talking about, private victories, where we are growing ourselves, transforming ourselves from being dependent to becoming independent. Does it mean that people who are adults are all totally independent? Not necessarily, because of our upbringing, because of experiences that we have had, because of not even having this framework on which to hang our thinking on. Some of us might be grown-ups, but we are so still independent. We are still so dependent on other things that are going on around us. For example, right now, the COVID situation that we're experiencing, that is going on. A lot of people, because of that, are realizing how dependent they were on certain circumstances going the way that they were supposed to, instead of them being adaptable. A person who is independent can adapt and be proactive, right? So in other words, the first habit that constitutes those private victories is you as an individual being proactive and not waiting for things to happen to you, right? Beginning with the end in mind, as well as putting first things first. We are going to unpack all of those as we go through the coming weeks. And then once you have established your independence, you now start scoring public victories, where you are now becoming interdependent, building relationships with others outside of your own personal sphere. How do you achieve that? By thinking win-win. As you are engaging with others, it's not to get from them all the time, but it's for you, both of you, to benefit from that relationship that you're building up, right? Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Many people, when we go into relationships, we are going in there to be understood as opposed to us understanding first, right? So be that proactive person who says, I would love to understand you first before you can even understand me. If that person also is coming to you with that kind of thinking, imagine how synergistic it becomes. They are looking out for you, you are looking out for them. That is where maturity comes in. And then you can synergistically work together, complementing one another. And then once that is established, you then enter into the area of continual growth and renewal, where the seventh habit that he calls sharpening the saw. So the 7 habits, in summary, are being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, putting first things first. That is where you are going to be scoring your private victories, right? Becoming more and more independent and establishing yourself in who you are as an individual, pertaining to particular areas, those 4 pillars of life that we talked about. Right? Our physical, our emotional, intellectual, our spiritual, and as well as what is the 4th one? I forget. All right. And then also in win-win, as we are engaging with others, as opposed to taking. We also want to give as well, seeking first to understand and then to be understood, and then synergizing our complementary strengths, and then sharpening the soul. All right. So we are almost coming to the end now. And then that will take us into our discussion, right? 7 habits overview, right? What are the outcomes of the 7 habits that we want to have as we go through as members of the club? Effectiveness, a healthy production capacity, system where we are patient, where we are generous, where we are temperate, we are managing our assets. When we talk about assets, we are talking about physical assets. That is our equipment, our houses, the cars that we have, the bodies that we have, the infrastructure, all the things that are physical that we are in charge of. We need to be able to grow ourselves to that level of independence, of being able to look after those things for ourselves. And then the financial side, where we are looking at our capacity to earn, investing and reinvesting, as opposed to spending, right? Capital and interest, capacity building, etc., etc. We need to build our own financial capacity to be able to earn, no matter what circumstances are prevailing around us. And then, of course, the human element as well, paying attention, to relationships, versus wanting the benefit of the relationship without investing anything. We are looking at parent-child relationships, our relationships with our spouses or significant others, our employer-employee relationships, our friendships. What we need, the underlying factor, with you managing our human relationships, is humans are emotional beings everywhere. It doesn't matter even if it's in the office. Much as we have, the intellectual side of things, we are emotional beings, right? Loyalty is an emotion and it cannot be bought. A lot of people think that by giving someone a salary, by paying them a wage, therefore they owe you, their loyalty. People will be loyal where they feel appreciated, where they feel understood, where they feel that their contribution counts, that is where you're going to see real, emotional involvement and also, long-term loyalty resulting out of that. So this is our last slide now. So as club members, we are looking at applying what we learn, learning to teach as well, sharing this information with our families, with whoever, we have identified as our person, that we are going to be sharing this information with. And what we need to understand is, as we are learning together, nobody can want change for us. So we've got to open our own personal gates, our own personal doors to personal transformation. So as we are discussing, it's up to you to apply what you are learning and own your independence and growth towards, transcending into interdependence, continually growing, and be patient with yourself, be patient with others as well. So in other words, we are not imposing anything on anyone. We are discussing this with an open mind. We are discussing this together, as people who are interacting. Those of you on Facebook, who are going to see the replay, or those who will be sent the replay on the email, let's keep the debate going and the discussion going as we dive deep into the 7 habits and see how they can transform our lives and change how we interact with our environment, how we interact with each other, and how we interact with ourselves as well. The beginning, the starting point really from what I have picked, from what I learned, with this section, is that the change begins with me. Let me be the change that I want to see in the world, and everything else is going to respond according to how I personally develop myself to become that independent person who then becomes interdependent and then continues to grow from level to level. All right, so that brings us to the end of our insights into the overview of the 7 habits. So when you are the one that I have on the live, maybe you may have something to say, or you may have some contribution that you would like to make based on the overview or on the points that I highlighted.
Thanks, Nomsa. Actually, I missed the first meeting. Thanks for the reminder today. Okay. But I'm really...
It was all on my part as well. I was sending the reminders quite late. I'm trying to improve and make sure that at least the reminders are sent on a Thursday or something like that.
Okay, no, I think if you send them the day the meeting is being held, it's even better. You send them on Thursday, we forget on Friday.
People can forget, yes, that's true.
Yes. No, it's quite an interesting overview. I like it very much. I like the fact that you say it is for me to want to change. There is no one who can change for me. If I want to change, that is the first step. And then it can transcend into the interdependence or whatever. I have to want to do it myself for me to be independent.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, awesome. No, thank you so much for that input. So guys, thank you so much. I'm talking to those on Facebook as well to say, let's keep the conversation going. If you want to be added to the Facebook group and maybe, you are not on the Facebook group yet, I can add you to the Facebook group as well. So that you can be able to see the conversation as it continues, because that's the platform where we are able to put comments that everybody can see. But thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you for those who will watch the replay as well, and the comments and the inputs that we are all going to make. I want to keep it as short as possible so that people are not discouraged by the amount of time that they have to spend, going through this material. And then keep the conversation going through the comments and so on. Thank you very much, Wongi. Have a good night. And they will meet next week. Yeah, so next week we are going to be talking about habit number 1, which is being proactive. How can we develop that skill in ourselves of becoming proactive as opposed to waiting for things to happen to us? That's going to be very interesting. So as we said, we are also going to ask some of us, to facilitate as well. I'm facilitating for now, but all of us are invited to volunteer, to facilitate, And yeah, that will keep it lively so that it's not the same voice that we are listening to every week. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night.